Колеги, вітання. Український кризовий медіа-центр продовжує свою роботу, і тема наступного брифінгу – міжнародне право і національна система правосуддя. Майдан, Крим, Донбас. Нашими спікерами є постійний представник FIDH при Міжнародному кримінальному суді Carrie, керівник відділу Східної Європи і Центральної Азії FIDH Олександра Кулаєва, а також дослідник Центру громадянських свобод Томак. Колеги, я запрошую вас до мікрофону. Welcome on stage.
Доброго дня всім. Мене звуть Томак, я представляю Центр громадянських свобод. Сьогодні нашими головними спікерами будуть наші колеги, які представляють Міжнародну федерацію за права людини, одну з найстарших правозахисних організацій в світі, яка дуже тісно співпрацює з Міжнародним кримінальним судом. І в цьому контексті хочу сказати, що у нас є вже досвід співпраці, тому що саме експерт, який був нам наданий фактично за допомоги, за сприяння Міжнародної федерації за права людини, допоміг правозахисним українським організаціям, в тому числі.
He helped to the international organization, including the Center for Civil Liberties, to provide a submission to the International Criminal Court as regards the events in Maidan. That was a submission from civil society. It's also a merit of our FIDH colleagues. Frankly speaking, this report we represent today have been prepared by us for a long time. And it was basically grounded on our research work of the Center for Civil Liberties. As many of you might know, you should know that we, since the very beginning of the events, not only on Maidan, but also before Crimea annexion, we fixed recording. We recorded the testimonies of the people who have been kidnapped, who have been tortured, and this will continue when the conflict in Donbas started. So this report is an attempt of review of all the events which happened since spring to 2014 up to now, and it shows that this report practically coincided with the termination of the acute phase of the armed conflict. Now a new story starts, but we hope that the main battle activities have already finished. So those evidences make the basic facts of this report. FIDH played main role in this report. I also want to draw your attention to the recommendation. Now this report is only in English, but in the nearest time we'll translate the resolutive part and the recommendation into Ukrainian, so to make them as fast as possible be read by Ukrainian authorities, because main accent in these recommendations in part of Ukraine regards the investigation, because unfortunately many of our colleagues in the International Right Protection Organization are seen and stating that undue investigation of law violations from Ukrainian side is observed. We see here that from the so-called LPR and DPR side violation, also an undue investigation is ongoing on the already freed territories. We had 2 days of meeting with the representatives of different departments in the General Prosecutor's Office responsible for different kinds of crime. My colleagues will talk on it more detail. We'll translate this report into Ukrainian. There is nothing that Ukraine would not know, basically. There is a review of main trends. I will show you the map of the violations of the cases fixed in the record. It doesn't mean that it would be an exhaustive list. This report doesn't pretend to be a complete one. Yesterday we discussed with Nastya Stanko in the Gromanska TV about the statistics. There is no statistics. Those are the trends, and we would like to attract your attention to them right now. In the view of that, as all of us know, our foreign minister already submitted some information to ICC prosecutor's office, so for him to investigate the events in Ukraine, not only those which happened in Maidan, but also which happened further and up to now. That's when I would like to stop, and I want to give the floor to our colleagues from FIDH. Thank you very much. I will talk Russian. The International Federation for Human Rights is the oldest right protection organization, which was created in 1922, and it includes basically 178 organizations in more than 100 countries of the world. In Ukraine, unfortunately, we started to work very intensively only during the recent years, because we, as doctors, like doctors, we do come where the situation becomes much worse. So in the recent years, our work on Ukraine intensified a lot. We are very happy to stay here for this opportunity to present our report. In the recent days, we worked a lot with Ukrainian lawyers. Right now, we met with government structures. We have been to prosecutors, General Prosecutor's Office, because the situation of civil victims is within the focus of our attention, and the strong violations of human rights are investigated by us. And the report we are studied by us. The report we present here is dedicated to the violations of human rights in the east of Ukraine, the situation in Crimea, and on the territories where the Ukrainian control was already regained. All those topics now attracted special attention due to the prolongation of Article 12.3 by Ukraine, which allows to use the jurisdiction of ICC for Ukraine, not only covering Maidan events, but also further events. After we presented communication on Maidan events in ICC, now we are working on the situation in the east of Ukraine. I believe you will have an opportunity to see our report. You will see how it is structured. We wanted to attract special attention to the trends, which are especially important for International Criminal Court, because they are regarding different groups of civil population. Would it be religious leaders, representatives of national minorities, and first of all, of course, pro-Ukrainian activists, representatives of political parties, and the trends, the patterns for certain kinds of tortures which are widespread in different settlements. The illegal detention and illegal custody, it allows us to say with assuredness on availability of certain trends in those areas. Anyway, we would like to draw attention to less systematic, probably, and less scale violations, but still have in place strong violations of human rights from the side of Ukrainian armed units. Would it be volunteer battalions or representatives of armed forces? Also, as I already mentioned, these cases do not allow us to talk on some trends, some patterns, but anyway, even separate cases are subject to be categorized as military crimes and should be investigated. So exactly the problem of impunity was in the focus of our attention, of non-access to the right, impossibility to protect the rights at the international and regional level for a large group of population. Here I would like to stop, although we will be happy to answer any of your questions. And now it's important for me to give the floor to my colleague who is working as a representative of the Federation in the International Criminal Court. And in the next months, she will be occupied a lot with Ukrainian topics. I would like to underline, for conclusions, that we are working a lot also for disputable territories in the Eastern Europe. Those are 5 territories with a finished process of unrecognized territories. They are shown in the map. Those are Transnistria, Crimea, Abkhazia, Ossetia and Mountain Karabakh. You see a very clear line. This is the southern border of defense or of protection of the Russian Federation. Unfortunately, all those 5 spots are show very clear political, geopolitical, and the regional trend organized by Russia. So we as human rights protection, we understand that there is no such a notion as law and the rule of law on these territories. Unfortunately, we are talking about 5.5 million people who live on those officially unrecognized territories. The east of Ukraine is still on some crossroad. It might add to those spots another one, and might add the same quantity of people who will be not able to apply to recognized and official courts, which would be controlled by international society as well, to national and international courts. They have no access to international courts. Anyway, now we have a unique phase when, for example, Crimea is subject, due to prolongation of the Article 12.3, under jurisdiction of International Criminal Court, and we believe it's very important in this connection. This is a separate topic, could be discussed for a long time, so when you have questions, we can discuss it later. Now I'm give the floor to Carrie, who is the representative of the International FIDH in Hague at ICC, and she has an experience of working in the ICC itself before she came to work for the Federation. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll be speaking in English, so we have a trilingual press conference today. I will briefly discuss the role of the International Criminal Court and perspectives for international justice in Ukraine. As my colleagues mentioned, I work for FIDH as their permanent representative to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. FIDH has worked with the International Criminal Court since its very beginnings in 2002, and we have represented victims at ICC proceedings, and we also provide evidence to the court in nearly all of the cases before it. As you are aware, the ICC is currently becoming more and more relevant for the region. Just for an example, the prosecutor of the ICC just last week announced her plans to launch a full investigation into the crimes committed in South Ossetia during the armed conflict in Georgia in 2008. Ukraine has not ratified the Rome Statute of the ICC. However, the government has filed 2 declarations with the ICC. These declarations give the court the full rights to investigate and prosecute crimes committed in Ukraine from November 2013 through today. So, this includes crimes committed during the Maidan protests, as well as crimes committed in Crimea and the East. The Office of the Prosecutor has now opened what we call a preliminary examination in Ukraine. This is the stage before launching a full investigation. If her office determines that there is a reasonable basis to believe that either war crimes or crimes against humanity have been committed on Ukrainian territory, her office will then assess if these crimes are being genuinely investigated and prosecuted at a national level. If not, she will launch a full investigation and prosecute those who are most responsible. Her office will examine actions by all parties, not only one side of the conflict. During the preliminary examination phase, before a full investigation begins, the prosecutor herself does not investigate, but rather she receives information about crimes committed that will be useful for her analysis. So it is fundamental that civil society organizations, lawyers, or others who have documented potential war crimes or crimes against humanity preserve this evidence and provide it to the ICC. However, it is important to understand that the ICC by itself is not a solution to impunity. The process for the ICC may take many years, even if a full investigation is launched. Even then, only a small number of people would ever face justice in The Hague, those who are the most responsible for the crimes. The International Criminal Court is a last resort, which will only intervene if national justice has failed to have effect. Victims of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Ukraine have the right to justice. Such serious crimes must not go unpunished. It is first and foremost the responsibility of national authorities to conduct serious and systematic investigations into these crimes. It is their duty to prosecute not only the direct perpetrators of the crimes, but also those who order them or fail in their duty to prevent them. The ICC will always be a court of last resort, but by giving it jurisdiction over atrocities perpetrated during this conflict, Ukrainian authorities have committed themselves to seeing justice done, whether domestically or internationally. This is an important first step towards ending impunity for atrocities committed in Ukraine. Further steps must now be taken nationally. And most importantly, anyone involved in committing atrocities in Ukraine must take note. These crimes will not go unpunished. So we're very happy to answer any further questions that you may have about our mission here in Kiev or the actions of the International Criminal Court.
Thank you a lot. Now we'll be having a Q&A session. Коллеги-журналисты, если есть вопросы, прошу.
Dear journalists, please, if you have any questions, please introduce yourself and ask question. Alexander Savitsky, Deutsche Welle. A question to Pani Kammer. Ukraine still didn't ratify the Rome Statute. If it would ratify it, how much the situation would change, and what would be the cooperation in this case? What investigation we would like to have, we would like hope to have? Дуже дякую за це дуже важливе питання.
Process of investigation of serious crimes, such as war crimes and crimes against humanity, will be facilitated if the Rome Statute is ratified in Ukraine. Even without ratification, the ICC now has jurisdiction. They have full authority to act. However, the law that's contained in the Rome Statute needs to be integrated into national law through the ratification of the treaty. This is a specialized body of law that is particularly suited to deal with massive and systematic crimes. So it can give a stronger legal basis within Ukrainian law for the investigation and prosecution of war crimes and crimes against humanity. It will also facilitate cooperation with the International Criminal Court should the ICC decide to move forward into an investigation. For that reason, it is truly necessary that the legislative branch in the Ukrainian government take the necessary steps to ratify the Rome Statute.
Дуже дякую. Наступне питання також буде до
Thank you very much. Next question is also to Ms. Carrie. On the 27th of October, the mission of ICC will come to Ukraine. What are your expectations and what results could we expect upon?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to interact directly with the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC next week. I imagine that the objectives of their mission will be to take further meetings both with national authorities and with civil society organizations and lawyers who have been involved in documenting alleged crimes, now extending into the armed conflict in the East. The Office of the Prosecutor has visited previously when they only had jurisdiction over the crimes within the context of the Maidan protests. So this extended jurisdiction will give them the opportunity to interact once again with national authorities, explain to them exactly what is necessary on their behalf in terms of national proceedings, and also create a gateway of conversation with civil society organizations and lawyers to submit further information to the court.
Дуже дякую. Чи є ще питання?
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions or precisations? Plus, introduce yourself. Inna Aksionova from Crimea. Could you tell which main crimes, which main violations have been found in Crimea? The report we present here doesn't cover the territory of Crimea. It's dedicated to Eastern Europe and the crimes which could be regarded as crimes against humanity or war crimes in eastern Ukraine. Nevertheless, we are also working in Crimea, and it was our disappointment. We see the very large violations. The scale is incomparable, obviously. We can talk about thousands of suffered, of aggrieved. Anyway, in Crimea there also are kidnappings, illegal deprivation of freedom, illegal verdicts of incompetent courts. That's talking about strong violations of human rights. Nevertheless, we could also state infringement of property rights in a very serious scale, infringement of right for free movement, right for education, for healthcare protection, and many other human rights, which, I have to repeat, are very typical for all the 5 regions, 5 spots I mentioned already, which are not subject to national or international jurisdiction. For example, if a person who stays in that spot near the border and he felt ill seriously, whatever would be the situation with visas, the Red Cross ambulance will be not able to get to help this person, to treat him. There is no free movement, and a huge package of social and economic rights is disappearing. And the situation itself is provoking violation of political rights. In Crimea, all these trends are being confirmed, and we can see it. Not talking about enforced assignment of Russian citizenship and some other phenomena which are not comparable with tortures and deaths, but also are severe infringement of citizens' rights. Within today's briefing, we are not paying attention to this because it's very important to see the overall scale and the trends I already outlined, and the fact itself of annexion of Crimea is not yet under jurisdiction of International Criminal Court. ICC has its own mandate, and annexion affairs, Carrie might correct me, but it is considered and maybe will be enabled in few years, in several years, but the fact of military aggression of one state onto the other state is not under the jurisdiction of ICC. Within the framework of ICC, we can talk about war crimes, crimes against humanity committed against concrete individuals. Carrie, would you like to comment on this, or I answered sufficiently?
Detail to what Sasha very well explained. The International Criminal Court at this juncture has jurisdiction only over genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. When the treaty was developed, it was also envisioned that it would include the crime of aggression, individual criminal responsibility for an aggressive war between states. This, we hope, will ultimately go into effect at the ICC, but at the earliest, it would go into effect for 2017, and it would not apply retroactively. So it's very important to understand that although the crime of aggression may be prosecutable by the ICC in the future, it will not take into account crimes of aggression before that actually goes into effect. And also, this is another important reason why Ukraine needs to take steps towards towards ratifying the Rome Statute to avoid impunity for crimes such as crimes of aggression in the future if this provision is to go into effect.
Дуже дякую. Наступне питання.
Thank you very much. Next question. Could you, I'm Arsen from 17th TV channel. How serious were the violations in Donbas region in the east of Ukraine? Do you plan to go to work in the uncontrolled territories? It's possible for you to work there. I already tried to answer this question in the beginning. I can talk say more in detail. We are talking about very serious human rights violations. We are talking on the most ever serious which can be considered and investigated, and we will recommend this to ICC. We submitted them these materials on what can be investigated, can be considered. Those are crimes against humanity, war crimes, the serious forms of human rights violation. With the help of our Ukrainian colleagues who helped us in gathering, collecting materials, evidences, we were able to state that there are happening killings, deprivation of life is the strongest form of human rights violation. Also, tortures, severe tortures, planned and intentioned systematic tortures. It's very important to see that not just a person would lose control and it would be an isolated individual effect. It goes on systemic torturing as a method for operating on certain territories with the population which are under the control. And the map which our colleagues showed us illustrates it's not just a city, just a village, it's a whole area where such similar cases of kidnapping and deprivation of freedom are observed. Torturings, threatening to life, and also we recorded imitation of death execution or people being forced to witness the execution or imitation of execution of other people is also a grave form of psychological violence. Also very bad conditions of confinement. We also have gathered some pictures of places where people have been confined. The death penalty lists which prove that there are certain categories of people who are subject to such kind of persecution. Those are religious leaders, representatives of certain parties having some political parties having some special views. Also, we presented evidences on destroyment for Roma, which happened in Slavyansk. So national minorities also can be subject to such crimes. The businessmen, the reasons are quite other, but it's a very clearly visible category. And also representatives of the government structures on the territories beyond of Ukrainian control. Also, we recorded grave violations of human rights committed by Ukrainian side. Here it also can go on kidnapping, tortures, ill treatment and illegal deprivation of freedom. The scale is very lower, but the facts have been recorded, and in our opinion a close investigation, a thorough investigation of such crimes is needed to put an end to this vicious circle of impunity, which is leading to an endless circles of this impunity spiral. I'd like to add, the conflict is ongoing. They are all very often arguing, in the meantime the war is ongoing, we can't investigate, we can't come to the gray area, to the uncontrolled territories. The judges are afraid to judge, to put verdicts even in the free territories, taking into account that their relatives, their families can stay in the occupied territories. Anyway, we have a deep conviction that impunity has no grounds to be justified. We have to struggle against it. Moreover, as the experience of our neighbors shows, in Chechnya war, the police and special wards after the conflict brings this experience of impunity, and the torture becomes a normal phenomenon in the peaceful life, in the peaceful cities which are very remote from war theater. So we have to fight impunity in each individual case, and as a system it should be a priority of the government already in this stage and in all the further stages. It is required by the interest of victims. There are already thousands of victims, and the interest of Ukraine itself, which want to achieve stability and peace on its territory. Thank you very much. Other questions? Mykola Mirny from the Center for Information on Human Rights. Could you answer? The law enforcement bodies now are not very efficiently investigating these crimes. What is your opinion? Why it happens so? You already partially answered this question. And what recommendations could you give for them to improve in this sense?
I will go in very concrete things.
Yes, we've heard multiple reports of a lack of efficient investigations. In other situations that have faced armed conflict or situations of mass human rights violations, crimes against humanity, war crimes, we found that it's very useful for law enforcement agencies not to address individual murders or kidnappings, but to have a full contextual analysis of the complex nature of these crimes. This is why we call them international crimes, because they are a specific type of crime that is different from individual murders or individual kidnappings or individual arbitrary detentions. They are widespread, or they are systematic. They are attacks that are directed against civilians. It's necessary to then qualify this in the national law to be able to effectively investigate and prosecute, and to have the appropriate mechanisms in place in the prosecution structures and coordination between different prosecution structures in order to address the complex crimes, and also up perhaps a chain of command of complex crimes, so that it's not left to investigating only the individuals who are the most directly, physically responsible for committing them.
В нашем отчете мы представили довольно конкретные такие степ-бай.
In our report, we presented the step-by-step recommendations for the Ukrainian authorities. But first of all, we believe it's very important. First of all, let's talk as sincerely. A political will for such crimes is very important. This political will should concern also some superficially available information in the cities with access, or the representatives of the authorities. And as it was done in many countries, if groups of investigators are needed who would come from other regions for investigation and then come back to the region, it would be one of the solutions. Obviously, if the investigator is on his own territory and he was under occupation and his family might remain still on the occupied territory, obviously they don't have sufficient impartiality and courage and unbiasedness in the investigation of these cases. We have an experience of countries which use mobile investigation groups, which are coming, doing their job and leaving. There are other options of better coordination with different departments or different units in charge of investigation. There's also an issue of resources, of means. We just discussed with the Prosecutors General on some unit under military prosecutors' office, which is in charge of serious military crimes. There are 34 persons there. Obviously, when it goes on what happens now in Donetsk and Lugansk, objectively it's impossible. And on the other side, it's an easy explanation of why the investigation would be not so fast, not so easy. They could just excuse, what can we do just with 34 people, 34 colleagues? It is an objective, but at the same time subjective obstacle. Human and financial resources should be provided, possibility should be provided. All this will be possible only with clear political will. So we come to where we started from. As regards investigation of crimes committed by Ukrainian military, servicemen. An efficient control is needed. And when the investigators couldn't penetrate to the territory of voluntary battalions, the Ministry of Interior should provide transparency of visitation by international structures. Such a situation couldn't exist. No, we don't want to allow you come to our territory. Once again, it's an issue of political will and political strength of perseveration, without which justice is not possible. Because the victims are already victims. They have been victimized already. They are expecting justice. But as already mentioned, for the future of the country, for the independence of it, for its image, but mainly for its normal function and without superfluous bureaucracy which appears in all the countries. It's not unique for Ukraine. When you have a long-lasting war conflict without an access to the territory, if you want to escape it, we have to fight the impunity from the very first minute, and it should be perceived as a priority, not like that we now can delay it and start it after the war. And the last very short question, please. In the Ukrainian internet, we have now evidences by investigators who are investigating Maidan crimes on that they are having obstacles at the level of judges and prosecutors' offices, etc. Do you know about it? Have you discussed it in the prosecutors general? Sorry, could you translate the question to Russian? I'm just 3 days in Kiev. I don't know Ukrainian. Now, in Ukrainian internet, there are many evidences of that the investigators in charge of Maidan's cases are blocked. Their work is blocked. They are obstacled at the level of the court bodies and at the level of prosecutor's office. Do you know about these facts? Have you discussed this with prosecutor's office? Our meeting today was more dedicated to the situation on the East. But anyway, we obviously are aware of the obstacles, of the problems which have the investigations of Maidan's cases. First of all, from the lawyers who represent the victims. They talk about very many obstacles which investigation process encounters, not talking about the terms, the time framework. From one side, Maidan's victims became a symbol of the situation in Ukraine and have become known to all the world. From the other side, the response which the state is providing to these crimes is not at the daily level. It doesn't correspond to the gravity of these crimes. This morning in the prosecutor's office meeting, we had discussion more focused on the situation in the east of Ukraine, but we also sounded our recommendations on Maidan issues another time when we were visiting, especially with that purpose, with the report on the crimes of Maidan. And it's a great pity, but we have to say that for those 1.5 years that passed since that meeting, the situation didn't change positively and seriously, and our recommendations have to remain the same, unfortunately. Thank you very much. That is where we would like to finish our press briefing. I would like to add that for the newsmen who are interested to communicate with our experts, please, we are inviting you to a coffee meeting.